So the first rule of factoring, and by the way, all these problems are going to be factoring. And factoring, another word for factoring is divide. You were dividing this out. It kind of looks weird, but we are dividing this out, factoring. The first rule of factoring is find a greatest common factor, greatest common factor. So when I look at, and I'm going to count the number of terms, we'll be counting terms when we're doing this. If I look at this, there are 3 terms here. Terms are separated by a plus or a minus. So there are 3 terms. So we're going to see if we can divide anything out. The first rule of factoring is always see if you can divide anything out from the first 3 terms. And if you look at the numbers in front of the variables, the letters, they all divide by 5. So that you can divide a 5 out of all of those. So you can divide a 5 out of all of those. So that's what we're going to do. We are going to divide each term by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1t squared, and another way of writing 1t squared is just t squared. Negative 10 divided by 5 is a negative 2t, and negative 25 divided by 5 is a negative 5. So if you noticed, I mean, now if I multiply, I mean, that's it. We are actually done with this factoring. If you look, if I multiply it back in, I'm right back where I began. So we divided it out. Factoring is dividing it out. And this is the greatest common factor. Now, I also want to talk about factoring 3 terms. This 3 terms, 1, 2, 3 here, we try to factor that also. But the first thing you always do is look for a GCF, greatest common factor. So that 3 terms doesn't factor, and I'm going to explain that here in a little bit. That 3 terms is not factor. And maybe I'll come back to that. So we're done. Once you factor out the GCF and you try to factor the 3 terms, it doesn't factor out, it doesn't divide out, then we're done. So this is the answers to the first problem. So question, go ahead.
So my problem with factoring in high school is always knowing when to stop. Is there any way that, is there like any for sure way to know when you should stop?
Yes. Yes. Well, I wanted to show you this down here, but factoring 3 terms. Well, let me go to a factoring 3 term problem that I see, and then I'll show you that we have to stop here. So I'm going to scroll down and go to a factoring 3 term problem that I see. Give me a second. Let me see. And this is one of them. Well, number 7 is one of them. I'm going to do number 8. Well, number 8 is one of them. They say these are all a little bit harder. 6 times 8. Yeah, let's go do. Give me a second. Let's do number 8. So I'm gonna erase this all, and we're gonna do number 8. So that was just the GCF. Well, let me finish the GCF, and then I'll go back. I'm sorry. I wanted to finish what I was doing, but yes. How do you know when you're done? You're right, and I will show you this. But on number 2, I want to do the GCF because it's different. Uh-oh. What happened? There we go. Oh, no. Let me get back. I clicked on the wrong button. Trying to get down to the factoring. There we go. I said I want to do number 2. Okay, so number 2. To factor this out, we want to find what we can divide, and we have 3 terms here. And if we look at the numbers in front, we can factor out a 3. A 3 divides out. And I'm going to raise it up a little bit so I have some more room. So here's the 3 terms. And if you 15, 12, and 9, a 3 divides out. So when you find the GCF, you're looking for first what number divides out. Out of all terms. And it has to be all terms. Step 2 is what is the lowest power? I always say X, but it could be any letter that we pick, any variable that's in the problem. What is the lowest power X? So if I look at all 3 terms, what is the lowest power W?
3.
Yes. So we're going to divide out a W3. So I also see an X. What is the lowest power X that you see?
No X.
Right. So you watched my video, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
I could tell because not many teachers say no X. Right. Does everybody see there's no X over here? That's the lowest power X, X to the 0 or no X. So we're putting no X right here. In other words, we're not putting anything there. If there's no X in all 3, the lowest power X is no X. So we don't put an X. We can't divide it out. It has to be in all 3. And then what is the lowest power Y?
2.
Y square. There's a Y3, there's a Y2, and there's a Y4. The lowest power Y is Y square. And then there's a Z, lowest power Z is no Z. Do you see there's no Z in the second one or the first one. So we don't put a Z out. So we try to divide out an X, a Y, a Z, and a W, but the W comes out, the Y comes out, but there's not an X in all 3, and there's not a Z in all 3. So this is what divides out 3W3Y square. So I'm going to divide each of these by 3W3Y square. 3W3Y square, 3W3Y square. And when I do that, I get 15 divided by 3 is 5. W4 divided by W3, in other words, W to the 4 is WWWW, all multiplied together. W3 is WWW. You see 3 cancel, and we're left with just 1 W. You can do top minus the bottom exponent rule. 4 minus 3 is W to the 1 power. And same way with on top, there's an X. Sorry, I'm making it messy. On top, there's an X that doesn't divide out at anything, so you have to put the X in there also. Do you see that X? And then the Y's, we have Y3 minus Y2 is Y1. So we just divided everything out. 15 divided by 3 is 3. X or W4, W3 is W. The X comes down. And then Y3 divided by Y2 is Y1. Next is negative 12 divided by 3 is a negative 4. The W's cancel because it's 3 and 3. And the Y's cancel, 2 and 2. So we just have a 4 there. Then it's negative 9 divided by 3 is a negative 3. W5 divided by W3, and you're left with 2 W's, W to the second power. y4, y2, 4 minus 2 is to the square. And then there's a z left over that doesn't cancel out with anything. So this is the answer. I know it's a little bit messy, but that is the answer. When you factor out the GCF. So is everybody okay with factoring out the GCF? You first find out what number divides out into each term, and then what is the lowest power of each variable. If, let's say, there's not an x in each variable, then you cannot divide out an x. Okay, everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Well, you're speaking for everybody.
Yeah.
Good, good. No, that's good. And once again, if you're really new to factoring or you're not up to date on factoring, I really want you to watch that part 1, part 2 video that we have there from week 1 and week 2, because I think, I mean, it's looks like I covered in detail in a lot of problems on there. Okay, so that's factoring out the GCF. I'm going to factor 3. Before I factor 3 terms, I'm going to factor 2 terms. How many terms is number 9?
3.
See, number 9 is 3 terms. Okay, so I'm going to factor. I have to find one with 2 terms because I'm going to factor 2 terms before I do anything else. That's 3 terms. That's 3 terms. That's 3. Oh, number 13 is factoring 2 terms. And once again, if you need help with factoring 2 terms after this, watch that other video. Oh, there's another 2 terms down here. So factor 2 terms. And I have 2 really weird steps. Well, first of all, the first thing you always do is look for a GCF. Look and see if anything divides. Does anything divide into 9 and 16 the same, like 2 or 3? No. So there's no GCF. It's not a big deal. That's fine. So factoring 2 terms, and you're always looking for a GCF first. Step 1, make it look like this. I know this is a weird step 1, but I want you to make it look like this. In other words, I want a parentheses squared minus a parentheses squared. And it must be a subtraction sign. If there's a plus sign, you can't factor 2 terms.
Anymore.
That should be a negative, a subtraction, or you cannot factor 2 terms. Can somebody tell me what goes into this first blank?
3x.
Yes.
I mean,
you're right. You're right.
3x, I'm right, yeah.
Because not 3 squared is 9 and x squared is x squared. In the second blank, it should be a 4. 4 squared is 16. So it's the same problem. We just put it in squares. So there's only one more step. Step 2. If this was, let me write it in a different color. If this is the first term and this is the last term, put the first term in each parentheses, put the last term in each parentheses. One has to be a plus and one has to be a minus. That's the second step. So do you see this is the first term? Put 3x in the first spot of each parentheses. The last parentheses has a 4. Put a 4 in each spot. 1 plus, 1 minus, and it's factored. We're done. If you distribute this, you end up with the same thing here, right? If you distribute 3x times 3x is 9x squared. 3x times a negative 4 is negative 12x. 4 times 3x is a positive 12x. 4 times a negative 4 is a negative 16. These cancel. One's a plus and one's a minus. So I have 9x squared minus 16. So that's just checking the work. But this is the factoring for two terms. And that's the steps for factoring two terms. That's what you use every time you see two terms. Look for a GCF, make it squares, and make sure there's a subtraction between it. If there's a plus between it, you can't factor two terms. And then the first parentheses goes in each. The last parentheses goes in each. One has to be a plus and one has to be a minus. It doesn't matter which one you use, the first one or the second one as a plus or a minus. All right, 14 is also two terms. I'm counting the terms and I see 1, 2. Step number 1, look for a GCF. What can factor out of 50 and 288? Boy, that's a big number. Well, 50 and 288, they're both even. So I know what 2 factors out of there. Oh, can I change this problem? If anybody else has this problem, let's change it. Oh, no, we're fine. We're fine. We are actually fine. We don't need to change it. So does everybody see how a 2 factors out of there?
Yes.
Okay. And what else factors out? What's the lowest power K?
K.
Yeah, K to the 1 power.
K to the 1. Yeah.
Yeah, or K. That divides out. What's the lowest power M?
No M.
No M. So only 2K divides out. So I'm going to divide both of these by 2K. 2K, 2K. 50 divided by 2 is 25. K3 divided by K to the 1 is just K squared. Minus 288 divided by 2 is 144. The K's cancel. And I'm left with M squared. Okay. Nothing else divides out of the 25 and 144, by the way. 144 is 12 times 12, which is 2 times 6, 3 times 4, and none of those divide into 25. So now I have 2 terms, and it looks like I can get something squared minus something squared. We're going to do step 1 now. And you have to figure out, hey, what goes in the first parentheses? 25 is 5 squared. K squared is K. 144, what goes in the parentheses?
Is it 12?
12 times 12 is 144. You could also go the square root of 144 is 12.
Oh yeah, 12. Yeah.
And M, 12M. So 12 squared is 144, and then I have M squared is M squared. Now we're going to put this in 2 big parentheses. $5K goes into the first spot of each. 12M goes into the second spot of each. One has to be a plus. If I am able to draw. Come on, one has to be a plus. One has to be a minus. And don't forget, this 2K is still part of our answer that we divided out. Why isn't it letting me draw? And so this is our fully factored answer for 2 terms. These are the steps for factoring 2 terms. Oh, there's actually another 2-termer down here. We're going to do that one also. Everybody okay with 2 terms? It's really not that bad.
Yes.
All right, let's clear that up and go to number 15 because it's also 2 terms. And yeah, 15 is that last one. So 81 and 16, look for a GCF first. Nothing. 81 is 9 times 9, which is 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. 3 doesn't go into 16. 9 doesn't go into 16. And there's X's over here and Y's over here. So there's no X's and no Y's. Nothing factors out. There's no GCF. And I'm just going to write that over here. No GCF. I know that. So if it's 2 terms, I'm going to try to factor it like this, 2 terms. You got to figure out what goes inside the parentheses. So what goes into the first parentheses?
9x.
Squared.
There we go, because we need x to the 4th. And remember, when you let's just say if I have a power raised to a power, you multiply. So it's 9. 2 times 2 is 4. If I had 2 to the x squared to the 3rd power, 2 times 3 is 6. When you have a power raised to a power, you multiply those powers. So we got 9x squared in there. Here we get 4y squared. Then we write 2 big parentheses. And there, do you see when you write the new 2 big parentheses, there's no sign between them. You're just multiplying them. 9x squared goes into the first spot of each. 4y squared goes into the second spot of each. One is a plus and one is a minus. So if you type this answer into the homework, your homework is going to mark it wrong. Can anybody tell me why?
Because they could factor more?
Yes. You can only factor 2 terms when there's a subtraction between it. So I cannot factor this one anymore.
Yeah,
but there's
not
a
that one.
subtraction here. And do you see how you can square with a minus sign between it? And 9 is a perfect square, 3x.
Yeah.
4 is a perfect square, 2y. So this factors, the 3x goes into each spot. You have to keep on going. The 2y goes into each spot. 1 plus, 1 minus. And don't forget, this 9x squared plus 4y is also part of our answer. And this would be what you would type into the homework. So anytime you have a power of 4 like this, always look to see if you can factor some more after you do that initial factoring on 2 terms. They always put that power of 4 to where you can almost factor it again. If you can't, you can't. If you can't find the perfect square, you can't. But normally when they put those powers of 4 in there like that, then you can factor again the way they do it. So that's factoring 2 terms. Factoring 3 terms. Let's go find the 3 term that I want to do. And number 12 is the first one. Wait, number 12 is, oh, I don't want to do number 12 yet. I'm going to do number 11. So we are going to, so this is factoring 3 terms. Now, I'm gonna just hold off a little. There's a little bit more I want to write below factoring 3 terms, but the first step is always look for a GCF. So the first step is always look for a GCF. What number divides out into all of those?
4.
1 divides into all of them, but I see you got to find the largest number that divides into all of those.
She just said 4.
8.
4 divides in, 8 divides in, but
Oh,
there's even a
18.
larger one.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah. What is,
What's 16 times 2?
Oh, 16. That's good.
16 times 2
is the greatest common factor. 16.
32, right? So
Yeah,
16 can divide out into each one of these. The
Oh,
lowest
yeah.
power m is no m. So I'm going to divide each by 16. 16 divided by 16 is 1m squared. 32 divided by 16 is a positive 2m. And 16 divided by 16 is 1. So this is what we get when we factor to GCF. Now, if we look, factor 3 terms when number in front of x squared is 1. In other words, the number in front of x squared, or m squared in this case, do you see the number in front of m squared is an invisible 1? If the number was a 2 or a 3 or something else in front of m squared after you factor out the GCF, there's a different rules for factoring it. So, and by the way, there's lots of different rules for factoring, but this is the way I show it. If the number in front of m squared is 1, then you have to factor 3 terms when the number in front of x squared equals 1. So step 1, find all pairs that multiply to equal the last term. And this is a really simple problem, the last term. The last term is 1. So all the things that multiply together to equal 1 are 1 times 1. That's it. Step 2, add or subtract a pair to equal middle term. And to get the middle term too, I'm just going to do 1 plus 1. It says add or subtract the pair. So if I do 1 plus 1, a positive, and I put the sign in front of each one, a positive 1 and a positive 1, that gives me 2. 1 plus 1 is 2. Step 3, use your pair to put in factored form. And the factored form is 2 big parentheses, and the last term is 1. This is our pair. We're going to put a plus 1 and a plus 1 in the last term. Anybody know what goes in the first term? What goes in the first spots here? Anybody knows what I should put here?
Is it M and M?
Yeah, just M and M, because M squared, right?
Yeah.
So it's always going to be this letter M because there's those 1 in front of it. And then don't forget the 16 comes in front, and this is the answer. And another way of writing it, by the way, just in case you see it, you can actually write it 16m plus 1 squared. You know, it's the same thing. So that's factoring 3 terms when the number in front of x squared equals 1. And we're going to do a couple more of these. Let's do number 12 now. These are the steps for that. So I'm going to erase this. If I'm going too fast, if anybody's taking notes or anything, don't forget, all the notes you take in class, you can use on the tests, on all our tests, except the final. The final, you're only allowed 1 page of notes front and back. But for all our tests that we take, any notes that you take in class, you can use on the test.
Can we also use them when you monitor us, or it's
yes, that's for the test. Yes.
Okay.
So when you're watching the videos, when you're doing the homework, keep a notebook. But I'm telling you, a lot of people write a lot of stuff. You have to have it organized. You know, maybe a tab saying factoring 3 terms, factoring 2 terms. Because, how do I factor 2 terms again? You could be looking all day, and then your time's going to expire on the test. So if you're going to do that, I say be very organized. Maybe use tabs in your notebook or something like that. Okay, so I'm going to erase part of this and go to the next. Where is my eraser at? Oh, there it is. I see it now. I see it. What happened to it? Give me a second. There it is. when the number in front of x squared is 1. So let's do number 12. It says, step 1, find the GCF. There's no GCF. There's no number that divides in all three, and there's no x over here. So there is no GCF for number 12. So step 1, find all the pairs that multiply to get 48. And I'm not worried about the negative sign. I'm just 48. 1 times 48. 2 times 24 is 48. What you could do on your calculator is 48 divided by 2. Then you could do 48 divided by 3. Oh, 16. 3 times 16. 48 divided by 4 is 12. 4 times 12. 48 divided by 5. No, that's a decimal. 48 divided by 6. 6 times 8. 48 divided by 7. 48 divided by 8. If I have an 8 already, then I'm done. I've done them all. These are all the pairs that equal 48. Now I have to add and subtract one of these pair to try to equal. Step 2, add or subtract one of the pairs to equal the middle term. And the middle term is a -1. Anybody see how I could get a -1? I could do 8 minus 6, but that's 2. 6 minus 8 is -2. Anybody know how I can get a -1 by adding or subtracting one of these pairs? You can't. So this cannot be factored. That's why I said this was a weird one. And when something can't be factored, if you can't do 3 terms like this, it can't be factored, then we call it prime. A prime number is something that can't be factored, can only be divided by 1 in itself. So if it cannot be factored, it's called prime. Well, let's find another one up there here. I'll give you a second. All right, let's go up and see what else we can find. Factoring a 3 term. Let me see if I can find it. Number 8. Do you see how there's 3 terms? 1, 2, 3. And the number in front of x squared is 1, invisible 1. Step 1, find the GCF. There's no number that divides out. The lowest power u, there's no u. The lowest power v, there's no v. So there is no GCF here. You're always looking for a GCF first. Step 2, find all the pair that equal the last term. And the last term is 70. 1 times 70. 70 divided by 2. 2 times 35. 70 divided by 3. No. 70 divided by 5. 5 times what? 70 divided by 5 is 14. 5 times 14. 6, 7, 7 times 10. I think that's it. 8, 9, 10. You back to 10, 10 times 7. So you're back. So these are all the numbers that multiply together to get 70. Step 2, add or subtract one of these pairs to equal the middle term. How do I get a -3? The middle term is a -3.
+7, -10.
Yes. And you have to write, I want you to write down the signs when you do this because people often get the signs wrong. So to get a -3, you use a +7 and a -10. That's a -3. So we're just about done. We put our 2 big parentheses. Do you see? We found it. Then use the pair to put in factored form. 2 big parentheses and the plus 7 and the minus 10. And it doesn't matter. You could put the minus 10 first and the plus 7, but the 7 has to have the positive and the 10 has to have the negative. In the front, we have u's. So we're going to have a u and a u. But be careful. In the back, we have a v square. So you also have to add the v and the v. That's why the middle term is a uv. You see 7 uv and a negative 10 uv is a negative 3 uv. So this is the answer. This is the factored form. The answer is u plus 7v times u minus 10v. And that's the factored form for the 3 terms. Okay. Everybody okay with that? I like that one. That's the easy one. Factored, when there's a number in front of the x square, that's when it gets a little crazier. And there's lots of different ways of doing it. If you use a trial and error method, yeah, that's fine with me. I mean, I used to only use the trial and error method, but since I've been teaching, which is 17 years. When I went to high school, I only used something called trial and error, where you just keep on trying until you get it right. But now there's a clear method of doing this. So let me go up and find the next one I want to do. Let's see. Oh, this is another one. We'll come back to that. Where I think we have to go down. We're going to have to go down. We're going to try this one. Number 9. Okay, so number 9, factor 3 terms when number in front of x squared does not equal 1. In other words, there does not equal 1. These, if you look, step 1, if you find the GCF, there is no GCF. So you always, look for GCF. And there's no GCF. So if there's a 1 in front, we can't use the same method that we used last time for the 3 terms. If there's something other than 1, like 8, we have to use a different method. So step 1. And by the way, this is also known as the AC method. This is also known as the AC method. Step 1, multiply A times C. If you remember, when you use the quadratic formula, this is A, this is B, and this is C. So we're going to multiply A times C. Multiply A times C and find all pairs that multiply those numbers together. Okay, so we're gonna I'm gonna put this over here on the side. 8 times 5. 8 times 5 is 40. So we're gonna find all the pairs that multiply 40. 1 times 40. 2 times 20. 40 divided by 4. 4 times 10, and 5 times 8. These are all the pair that equal 40. Step 2, add or subtract a pair. Add or subtract a pair to equal middle term. Kind of like what we did before. And does everybody see where it equals the middle term right here? If it lets me write it, a plus 2 and a plus 20 equal 22. A plus 2 and a plus 20 equals 22. Step 3, be careful. It's called split the middle. You have to split the middle into a plus 2 xy and a plus 20 xy. You're using this pair to split the middle. Split the middle with your pair. Maybe I should write that down. Split the middle with your pair. And this 5y comes, y square comes down, and this 8x square comes down. Oh man, I should have did 4 terms before I did this. And then step 4.
Factor by grouping.
Yes, step 4, factor by grouping. And is it okay? I'm sorry, I'm gonna leave this problem and come back to it. I should have showed you how to factor by grouping first. Because now I'm not going to put the steps for factor by grouping because I want to actually do a factor by grouping problem, and we have those up above. So I'm actually going to come back to this. So just if you can, leave a good little gap underneath, and I'm going to go to the next problem, then I will come back to here. I apologize. I should have did factor by grouping first. So I am going to no, yeah, because I have to write the steps down for factor by grouping. So let me clear all this out. I'm sorry, but let's go up to a 4-term problem, which is right here, right here, right here. And I'm going to do this one right here. Let's see. Yes, we're going to do number 4. So this is factoring 4 terms. And anytime you have 4 terms, it's called factor by grouping. Step 1, group first 2 and last 2 terms. Now, you got to be careful. If third term is negative, put negative in parentheses. Put negative inside parentheses. Put negative inside parentheses. So I'm going to group the first 2 terms, put a parentheses, and you see the third term is negative. So I want to put it in the parentheses. But if you put it in a parentheses, there has to be, because these are all adding and subtracting, then you have to put a plus in between the parentheses. In other words, right, a plus minus is the same thing as a minus. So if the third term is negative, put a negative inside the parentheses and then a plus sign between them. You might want to add that if you want to write that down. Then a plus sign between. Because they're really all adding. Step 2, find the GCF of each group. So the first, I'm going to look just at the first group. And a 5 and an X factors out of this first. Do you see a 15 and 20, a 5 factors out? The lowest power X is an X. So if I divide each by 5x, 15 divided by 5 is 3, x squared divided by x is x. 20 divided by 5 is a positive 4, and x divided by x cancels each other out. The next group, because the third term is negative, look at 12 and 16. What does 12 and 16 divide by?
-4.
Yeah, because the third term is negative, you have to divide by a negative number. Because the third term is negative, I'm just going to put a little dot there with an arrow. You have to factor out a negative, and the GCF is 4. So if I divide both of these by -4, -12 divided by -4 is 3x. -16 divided by -4 is a +4. So if you GCF out of each group and then look at this star, parentheses must be the same. And look at our parentheses, 3x plus 4 and 3x plus 4. The parentheses must be the same, or you can't continue with factor by grouping. You're done. It can't be factored. Step 3, factor out the parentheses. In other words, let me change my color here. This parenthesis, we actually have, if you don't see it, we actually have 2 terms now. Do you see that subtraction is factoring 2 terms? I'm going to factor out, I'm going to divide out the parentheses. 3x plus 4 divides out. We're dividing that out. What's left over when you take that 3x plus 4 out is the 5x and the -4. And this is our answer. If you multiply this, if you distribute this and FOIL it, you're right back where you began. So that's factoring 4 terms, factor by grouping. And we're going to do that again. I'm going to do that again for number 5, and then I'm going to go back to the problem that we did earlier. So that's called factor by grouping. That last step, factor out the parentheses, that's it. You got to realize that you're just dividing that out of the whole thing and whatever's left over. Do you see? I can come back to check my work and distribute. This times 5x, end up with this. This times a -4, you end up with this. Everybody okay with that step? Hopefully you've seen this factor by grouping before. Is factoring new to anybody here? You guys are all in the college algebra, so I'm hoping most of you had it. So this is factoring 4 terms. We're going to do the same thing for number 5, if that was a little confusing. So factoring 4 terms. Step 1, look for a GCF, 2, 3. I don't see a GCF. So you always look for a GCF, and there's no GCF. Step 1, put a parentheses around the first 2. If there's a negative in the third term, put a parentheses around the second 2, plus sign between them. Ooh, I kind of like this one. 20 and 9, nothing factors out. And here, -15, x, y, and 12, 3 factors out, but our parentheses won't, if nothing factors out, we can say 1 factors out. Here, you can factor out a -3x, but then you're left with 5y -4, and the parentheses are not identical. So you can't do that. So that's not possible. However, so if that happens to where you end up where your parentheses are not the same, what you can do is try to rearrange. So I'm going to rearrange these. I see the x's. I'm going to try to put the x's together, plus 12x. And then I have -9y. Let me do it this way, because this is a 20, and I know 5 is a factor of 20. If that's, let's see, 4 and 5, I think we might be able to do that. And then I'm going to put my minus 15xy minus 9y. I still used all of them, but I rearranged them a little bit. And I don't know if this is going to work. I might have to rearrange them again. Put a parenthesis around the first two, put a parenthesis around the second two, put a plus sign between them. Here, a 4 and an x factors out. 4 goes into both of these, and the lowest power x is x. When I divide each by 4x, I get 5x plus 3. The x's cancel here. On the next one, a negative 3 and a y. The lowest power y is y, factors out of there. If I divide each of these by negative 3y, negative 15 divided by negative 3 is 5. The y's cancel, and I get an x. Negative 9 divided by negative 3, and it's negative 3y. The y's cancel, and I get a positive 3. The parentheses are identical here. So if it doesn't work the first time, you might want to rearrange, and it's going to take a little practice. I noticed that there's 2 with just x's, so I grouped the x's together. And then the other 2 had just y's, so the only ones with y, so I grouped them together. And I put the 15 in front because I had a multiple of 5 in the first one, so I wanted a multiple of 5 in the first one in the second group. I mean, in the worst case scenario, you would end up with 3 plus 5x, which is the same thing as 5x plus 3, if you didn't rearrange it the way I did. But you would have got the same thing. So next, factor out the parentheses. The parentheses comes out in front. When you factor the parentheses out in front, what's left over is 4x and a minus 3y. And there's our answer. Factoring 4 terms, called factor by grouping. Okay, so that's a tough one. A lot of people don't get it. They think, oh, it's prime, it doesn't factor. But for the 4 terms, you had to try to rearrange if you can. All right, I'm going to go look for, I think we had something else up here that I wanted to show you. Yes, number 3. If you look at this, it just says factor this. And this is kind of a factor by grouping, but the step, they didn't show you all the steps. They left with, look, there's only, I should have asked this already. Can somebody tell me how many terms are in number 3? How many terms?
1?
2.
It's 2. Do you see all terms are separated by a plus or a minus? That parentheses counts just as one variable if you want. You see, there's 2 separate terms. There's only one plus or minus separating this. It's almost like you're saying 4x big A, you can use that variable as the big A, minus 5 big A. Do you see? This, you can call it just a expression or a variable itself, but there's only 2 terms there. So so I can see that if I can look for a GCF, and the GCF is the parentheses, we're going to divide out the parentheses. If you have 2 terms, you can divide out the entire parentheses. They just come out, and what's left over, the 4x and the minus 5. That's a 4x and the minus 5. So when you see those 2 parentheses like that, just factor out the parentheses and you're done. Okay, there's more. Let's see. Did we do number 6? Wait, we did this one. We did these 2, right? Did we do numbers? I don't know. Did we do number 6? I don't think we did number 6. Okay, so we haven't done number 6 yet. Let's do number 6, 4 terms. Group the first 2. Group the second 2, except there's a plus sign. The third term is positive. So even if you would put a parentheses there, it's still positive. So we put a plus sign between it. A 3 factors out of here, and an x square. You see the lowest power is x square, and between 15 and 12, a 3 factors out. When I divide each of these by 3x squared, I get 5x squared minus 4. That cancels. Here, 4 factors out. Divide each of these by 4, and I get 5x squared minus 4. If the parentheses are the same, then you factor out the parentheses. 5x squared minus 4. And what's left over is 3x squared and a plus 4. And we're done. And you could try to factor this out, but 5 is not a perfect square. It's 2 terms. It's not a perfect square, so we're done. Factoring 4 terms. So I think that's it. I want to go back to that one I was doing. Let me see what else we had here. Anybody remember what was the number of the one that I wanted to come back to? Did anybody write it down? What was the number? Help me.
I think it was number 9.
Number 9. This one here? Okay. Yes. Okay, so let me get back to where we were. First, we're going to factor out a GCF. You always look to factor out a GCF, and sure enough, a 5 factors out of here. And when I divide them all by 5, I get 3x squared. I don't remember this being negative 65 divided by 5 is what? 13. 13x, and 50 divided by 5 is negative 10. Oh wait, you said number 9, and I'm doing number 10. But that's okay, because it's very similar to number 9. Very similar to number 9. Now we have factoring 3 terms. Do you see? This is part of our answer. I'm done with that. I'm just looking at this now. Factoring 3 terms when the number in front of x squared is not 1. We have to use the group, the splitting the middle and factoring and all that, factor by grouping. So first we have to split the middle. This is 3 terms when x squared, the number in front of x squared does not equal 1. It equals 3. So remember the step, multiply, it's called the AC method. And we're going to multiply A times C. A times C is 3 times 10 equals 30. So 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, and 5 times 6 all equal 30. Which one will give me a negative 13? Ooh, I like this one. Which one will give me a negative 13? Anybody?
Negative 3, a negative 10.
Yes. However, what about this? Negative 15 and a plus 2.
Oh, that's a good one.
So this has 2 possible answers. But when you multiply these 2 together, what do you get? Positive 30, correct?
Positive, yeah.
And when you multiply this together, you get
2 times.
negative 30.
Negative, yeah.
Our
Ooh.
last number is negative. Our last number is negative. So we need a plus and minus. Unfortunately, do you see our last number is a negative? C is a negative. So a negative times a negative ends up being a positive. So this is the only answer. You cannot use the other one, because when you multiply those two together, see, these two have to multiply together to equal the sign of the last number. And when you add or subtract, it has to equal the sign of the middle number. So there's that negative 10 right there, that negative, one of these have to be negative.
Yeah.
Okay,
Inside.
so +2 and a -15. So I'm going to split the middle, +2 and a -15. Now, I don't like it when the third term is negative. So instead of +2 -15, I'm using -15x and a +2. I'm putting the +2 first. Do you see? Because I like, that's the third term. I mean, I'm putting the +2 second because I like my 4 terms. I like that third term to always be positive if I can make it that way. And then this comes down to 3x squared. So I'm using this one, the +2 and a -15, and it's x's. So I'm using a -15x and a +2, and I don't want that third term to be negative, so I put the -15 first. Then we factor by grouping. A 3 factors out of here and an x. When I divide this by 3x, I get x minus 5. Here, a negative, that's a +2. So a 2 factors out of there, a +2. When I divide these by 2, I get x minus 5. The parentheses are the same, so I can factor out the parentheses. And I'm left with 3x plus 2. So anytime that we end up with a number in front of the x square, you have to use the AC method, which then leads to factor by grouping, but don't forget, when you type this in, the 5 has to be part of the answer. That 5 was just sitting there, but it has to be part of the answer. All right, so the last one, we got 6 minutes left. I'm going to do number 9. Go back to do that. There's number 9. And what we did for number 9 was nothing factored out. So we did 8 times 5 is 40. 1 times 40, 2 times 20, 4 times 10, 5 times 8 is 40. Is that it? 2, 8, 4. I think that's it. And a +2 and a +20 gave us a 22. Plus 2xy, by the way, and plus 20xy, because we're using xy's here. It's split, we call it split the middle. 2xy plus 20xy equals 22xy. And then we have the 5y square here and the 8x square here. Factor by grouping, group the first two, group the second two. A 2 and a y factors out of that first group. A 2 and a y. And when you factor by 2y, you end up with 4y. 2's and the y's cancel, and you're left with an x. Here, a 5 factors out. A 5y, sorry. And if I divide each by 5y, I end up with 4x. Oh, wait, maybe I'm looking with 4xy. That's a y squared. What? 5y. Okay, so that 4x. Oh, this is an x. I thought it was a y. See, I can't read my own writing. I'm sorry. This is, I don't know what I just did. Let me erase this. I'm too messy. I'm sorry. Let's see. We split the middle for plus 2xy plus 20xy plus 5y squared and 8x squared. And group the first two, group the second two. A x factors out of here. This is an x. I factored out a y. A 2x factors out of there. When you divide each by 2x, you end up with 4x. The x's cancel, plus y. Here, a 5 factors out, a 5y, a plus 5y. When you divide each by 5y, you end up with 4x plus y. 1 and y cancels. And now we got the same thing. So the 4x plus y factors out. And what's left over is the 2x and the plus 5y. So that's it. Oh, Lordy. That's factoring. And if you see, that's for the college algebra, there's only these problems that they wanted us to cover with you guys. If you look at the co-rec, we covered a ton more, and it was 3.5 hours worth in the co-rec. So you can come back and look at, I think you can come back. Let me hit stop share for a second. I think you can come back and watch this video. If you can't, somebody let me, if you want to come back and watch this video, you can. What you have to do, I think, is when you go to Zoom, do you see cloud recordings? When you go to Zoom, do you see this cloud recording button?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so you can click on that and you'll see this recording. It'll pop up here in about an hour when it's done processing. So if you want to come back and watch the video from today, you can go to Zoom and hit cloud recording and you can watch it. Unfortunately, there's like 5 different versions of it. The one with the highest version is all video, where they don't show everything. So I think you always have to watch the one that's got the second highest. When you put this in, when you watch the second highest and hit play, it'll show, yeah, it'll show everything and the transcript. So yeah, always look for the one with the second highest megabytes. The highest one is just all video. It just shows the video. It doesn't show the actual typing it in. And there's 5 different ones. Here's the audio only. I'm not sure what this might be, just one other thing. So you can look at it, but normally you watch the one with the second highest megabytes in it, and that'll be the one that you can watch. And if you really need the extra help in the factoring part, then watch the week 1 video, R4 part 1, because that's what we gave to the co-requisite class, the students that need extra help. And then there's an R4. All right, that's all I had for the day. I'm going to hang around if anybody has any questions. You guys have a good day, and I will see you on Wednesday. Try to watch that in week 2. Try to watch that other video. I think it's on 1.4 before class next time. That video on 1.4.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you.
Okay.
I'm not going yet. I have a question,
Okay,
please.
yeah. I'm going
Yes,
to hang around.
Okay, yeah, I was doing a problem, a quadratic formula problem, and when I got down to x equals, because I did the whole problem,
Right.
and then I got down to x equals 8 plus or minus 2 radical 3 over 2.
Okay, hang on. X equals
8 plus or minus 2 radical 3 over 2.
the whole thing is over 2. But anyway,
Yes. Sorry.
okay.
And then I can't figure out how, because that's not the right answer. There's
Okay,
more.
so that over 2, you can put it underneath both of those. Do you see?
Yeah.
And so the answer would be 4 plus or minus the square root of 3.
And that's how I do it,
Yep.
because that's the part that I couldn't figure out how.
Yes.
how
Do you see
okay.
that when you're dividing by 2, you're dividing each term. There's 2 terms there. 8
Yeah.
divided by 2 is 4, and 2 divided by 2 is 1. So this would be the
And-
answer. Sometimes they
that-
make you in the
okay.
homework, sometimes they make you type it in 4 plus the square root of 3, then hit comma, 4 minus the square root of 3.
Yeah, that's the solution pair, but that's the
But-
part that I couldn't figure out. The
Yeah.
life for me, man. The last step.
The problem is sometimes, let me show you what sometimes the problem is that confuses me sometimes is if you have this 5 plus or minus 2 square root of 3 over 2, you know, the whole thing is over 2. And
Yeah.
since the computer should take that as an answer because they both don't divide by 2.
Yeah.
But, you know, they both, so normally the computer will take this. They won't take this one as an answer because there's a factor of 2 that can divide out.
That can divide out, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So because of the 5, that one have to stay just how it is.
Yes. I mean, in the
okay.
worst case scenario, if you wanted to, the computer would mark this correct. But you could write this like this: 5 over 2 plus the square root of 3. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, you could, but no, because they both don't divide. The computer accepts this as an answer. Since these
So-
both divide, you got to factor out a 2 and cancel the 2.
So if everything doesn't divide, you don't divide at all.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
And that was what I couldn't figure out.
Okay.
Your videos like put me right where I needed to be.
Good.
I'm
Good.
very grateful for that.
Good. I'm glad.
Thank you so very much.
Sure thing. I'm here if you have any questions. You have a good
Okay
day.
then. Same to you, sir. Thank you very
Sure
much.
thing. Bye.